I've been sat here watching two grown men screaming into the mics about Battlefield 6, and I need to talk about it. Because between them, they've managed to get almost every single verifiable claim wrong, ignoring single most important thing that's happened to this franchise in the last 4 years, and then wrapped it all up in a bow made of conspiracy theories and misread analyst reports. And somehow, over 95,000 of you watched one of them and thought, yeah, that checks out. It don't check out. None of it checks out. And wait until you see how they've ignored single most tragic event in this franchise's history. Alright, you lot. Let's start with BlameTruth, shall we? A man who opens his video, and I shit you not, by suggesting that people behind Epstein's redacted documents might be putting drugs in his water. That's his cold open. That's how he greets you. Not with facts, not with analysis, not even with half-decent what's up guys, but with a full-blown conspiracy theory about shadow operatives spiking his tap water because he's apparently so dangerous to $1 trillion company that they've resorted to chemical warfare against a bloke who gets 100,000 views on a good day. And look, I get it. YouTube rewards outrage. Bigger personality, bigger claims, bigger clicks. But there's a line between playing a character for engagement and genuinely sitting there telling your audience that corporate entities might be physically targeting you, because once you cross that line, everything else you say gets filtered through that lens. Every legitimate criticism you make, and he does have some, gets buried under a mountain of your own paranoid bollocks. It's like wrapping a decent steak in tinfoil and then chucking it into a skip. Don't matter how good a steak is, nobody's fishing it out of there. But here's where it gets irritating. This same man, in this same video, is flogging a mobile rewards app. He's sat there telling you that massive corporations are personally surveilling his content, that he's under some kind of targeted harassment campaign, and then without even a breath of self-awareness, he pivots to, and here's today's sponsor. Download this app and earn points. Forget cognitive dissonance. That's one hell of a fucking superpower. You can't sit there raging about corporate manipulation while simultaneously being a willing mouthpiece for a monetisation scheme in a single breath. Well, apparently you can, because he just did. 90-odd thousand people watched it and presumably nobody blinked. And then there's his big surveillance claim. He reckons someone at Activision or EA or whoever's turn it is this week has got a dedicated operative monitoring his account and actively working to discredit him. Now, here's what actually happens. Because I've worked in these environments and I know how this sausage gets made. Every major publisher has a community team. It's their job to monitor sentiment across social media, YouTube, Reddit, forums, all of it. They log it in spreadsheets. They tag it by sentiment. They feed it into reports that get glanced at in Monday meetings and then promptly ignored in favour of whatever player telemetry data is actually telling them. Some poor sod on 28 grand a year in Guildford is sat there with a dual monitor setup, one screen on BlameTruth's latest rant, other screen on a heat map showing where 2 million daily active players are actually dying on Orbital. Guess which one informs a design decision? It's not BlameTruth. Does his name come up in meetings? Probably, yeah. He's got 530-odd thousand subscribers and is consistently critical. That'd be negligent not to know. But there's a canyon-wide gap between Alex flagged his video in his sentiment report and $1 trillion company has deployed assets to neutralise me. One's sensible business practice, others a persecution fantasy that conveniently makes him sound far more important and far more threatening to corporate interest than his actual reach justifies. And worst part, he actively sabotages his own best arguments. Every time he wraps a valid criticism inside that conspiratorial framing, he hands anyone who wants to dismiss him a perfectly wrapped excuse to do exactly that. See, both BlameTruth and Nero Cinema lean heavily on an analyst report to build the Battlefield 7 timeline predictions. And this is where it gets genuinely embarrassing, because neither of them appear to have actually read bloody thing. What this report says, in plain English that a 12-year-old could understand, is that there's a projected 5 to 6 year transition period for franchise development cycle. That's a broad industry forecast. It's not a release date. It's not a confirmation. It's an analyst doing what analysts do, which is project trends based on available data and market conditions. But BlameTruth takes this, does some absolute pub napkin maths, and arrives at a specific Battlefield 7 release window like he's cracked some kind of Da Vinci code for shooters. He's building an entire narrative arc on a foundation made of sand, and he's doing it with such conviction that his audience don't question it. Because why would they? He sounds confident. He's got graphs. Never mind that graphs show comparison between Battlefield 3 era map output and Battlefield 6 content pacing without ever once acknowledging that a modern Frostbite map requires exponentially more asset creation, more QA passes, more memory optimization, more lighting work, more destruction physics testing, and more certification than alt from 2011. You can't compare a 2011 development pipeline to a 2025 one and draw meaningful conclusions from it. That's not analysis, it's nostalgia wearing a lab coat. And Nero does a version of the same trick. He's got his own timeline, his own predictions, and they're built on the same misread data dressed up with slightly calmer delivery. He presents it more measured, I'll give him that. He's not claiming to be chemically targeted by billionaires, but fundamentally he's making the same intellectual error, which is treating an analyst projection as confirmed schedule and then getting angry when reality don't match his interpretation of someone else's forecast. That's like reading your horoscope and getting upset when Tuesday doesn't go well. Now, both these lads spend considerable time moaning about Battlefield 6's post-launch content pace. Fair enough on surface. Players these days want more maps, more weapons, more modes, faster. They need that dopamine. But when you're going to make that your entire editorial position, you have a basic fucking obligation to understand why things are moving at pace they are. And neither of them does. Because neither of them has done a single minute of actual homework. I'll start with those 4 studios. Because Nero especially loves throwing that number around like it's an automatic indictment. 4 studios, and this is all we've got, he says. As if 4 studios means 4 times DICE's output. It don't. It never did. Here's what those studios actually do. DICE leads multiplayer development. That's your core maps, your core modes, your core gunplay loop. Criterion and Motive handle campaign, with Motive also contributing to multiplayer map design. Ripple Effect Studios is leading development on RedSec, Battle Royale mode. And Ridgeline Games were working on single player before EA shut them down in 2024. These aren't 4 interchangeable factories stamping out identical products. They're specialised teams with specific remits, different skill sets, different development pipelines. Criterion ain't sat around twiddling its thumbs waiting to make a multiplayer map. That's not what they were hired to do. But here's a bit that genuinely makes me blood boil. And I mean that. Vince Zampella, man who took over Battlefield franchise and steered it from rock bottom of 2042 to a game that shifted 20 million copies in the first 3 months. He died on December 21st, 2025 in a tragic car crash on Angeles Crest Highway. He was 55 years old. He died 2 months after Battlefield 6 launched, just 2 months into a live service cycle that he were overseeing. Now, when Nero and BlameTruth and half of YouTube kicked off about Season 2 being delayed from January 20th to February 17th, screaming, "Is this a joke?" into the cameras like they'd been personally betrayed, not a single one of them stopped to think about why it might have been pushed back. Zampella died December 21st. Julian Garrity got announced as joining Battlefield Studios on January 16th, just 4 days before Season 1 were originally supposed to end. Producer Alexia Christofi went on record saying, "People above my pay grade are still trying to figure out what happens moving forward." So you've got a 4-studio operation that just lost its creative leader, a brand new executive walking through the door into an organisation he's never worked in, a GM in Byron Bede holding everything together with duct tape and determination, and these two are furious because they've had to wait a few extra weeks for a season update. A man's dead. Not just any man, a man who worked vision behind this game's recovery, who instilled a culture of autonomy and risk-taking at DICE. That's not a minor production hiccup. That's an earthquake in franchise's leadership structure that explains almost every single gap in content pacing that these two are screaming about. You don't get to demand answers for why content is slow and then ignore single biggest reason it's slow. That's what's called intellectual dishonesty, and it's disrespectful to Zampella's legacy. What we're looking at here is two creators who built entire editorial positions out of a combination of misread data, zero structural understanding of game development, and an industrial-grade case of main character syndrome. BlameTruth think he's being chemically surveilled by billionaires. Nero thinks 4 studio names on a Wikipedia page means 4 times as many maps should exist. And both of them are basing the Battlefield 7 predictions on a leaker's DM and some release cycle arithmetic that'd get you laughed out of a GCSE maths class. But here's what both of them will never admit, because admitting it would undermine their entire content model. Nobody at EA gives a shit what they think. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a structural reality. When you've got 2 million daily active players generating terabytes of behavioural data, engagement metrics, heat maps, session lengths, purchase patterns, drop-off rates, you don't need a bloke with 90-odd thousand views telling you what's wrong with your game. You've already got that data. It's more granular, more accurate, more actionable than all a YouTube video can provide. Could that data be biased towards existing players? Yeah. Does it still tell you more than a content creator ranting about map counts? Absolutely. And if these creators actually wanted to influence development decisions, genuinely wanted to make a difference rather than just generate outrage content, they'd be organising coordinated community feedback through official channels. They'd be building constructive cases with verifiable data. They'd be engaging with community managers in a way that gets their concerns logged as actionable feedback rather than filed under high outrage, low data literacy, and quietly deprioritised. But that don't get clicks, does it? That don't get 90-odd thousand views. Claiming you're being drugged by shadow operatives and waving an analyst report around like it's a Dead Sea Scroll that only you can translate, now that gets clicks. And that, my friends, is what happens when you let outrage do your own work for you. You end up shouting into the void with bad maths, misread reports, and a persecution complex so thick you could plaster a wall with it, all while stepping over actual human tragedy because it don't fit your narrative. But look, this ain't just a Battlefield problem. This culture of ignoring reality for the sake of a thumbnail is everywhere. In fact, you want to see how this same logic is currently being used to mislead zombies community? You need to watch my breakdown on Nero Cinema claims regarding Black Ops 7 Doomsteel camo challenges. It's same intellectual error, just a different game. I'll see you over there, you magnificent.